The full title of my message today is Regaining Civility in an Angry World. I stand before you today with both excitement and humility. I will discuss a subject that we are unfortunately experiencing all too often as both a victim and a perpetrator. And the subject is anger. We will also discuss ways to restore anger's opposite, civility, in your world and mine. We are experiencing bursts of anger in the home, in our neighborhoods, on roadways, in the workplace, at schools, and in our religious communities. Has it always been there, cultivating like a virus and now spreading like an epidemic? Or is this new, something created by the circumstances of our time? I believe it is a bit of both. There are so many subtopics: trust, self-esteem, poor communication, guilt, personal responsibility, boundaries, all that clash together to create the types of explosive and passive anger that has become a staple of our society, that we can't cover them all in one sermon. I will, however, cover the major ones. My way is to present the outline of the three major areas we'll explore. 1, identifying our primary emotion and societal view. 2, misidentification of emotion and unhelpful responses to it. And 3, restoring civility, and that's really not as hard as it might seem. Now be prepared. I will ask at times for your input. This is an interactive sermon. To make sense of anger, we must first have a framework, a definition of what anger is. And since a speech or sermon is simply a workshop in shortened form, I'll call on my skills as a trainer and slip into teaching mode for a few minutes. I firmly believe that any discussion on any topic, to be fruitful, one must start with a definition. A definition provides a roadmap that allows us to travel the same path and function together in a healthy, efficient, and productive manner. A definition is a blueprint that allows us to build together from the bare frame to the completed complex building. And so I will define anger, but not yet. Who among you have experienced or seen the following? A child runs toward the street chasing a ball. The parent catches the child just as they reach the curb. Does the parent hug, kiss, and comfort the child who doesn't realize the crisis that almost occurred? Does the adult softly whisper in the child's ear a repeat of the warning to be more careful? No. More likely, the parent grabs the child roughly, adrenaline is flowing, and yells, "How many times have I told you not to go near the street?" How many times have you seen something like that? Are you familiar with the past joke gift that was the rage, pun intended, that was placed on a car dashboard? It created sound effects, missiles taking off and bombs exploding, so when one was almost cut off in traffic, one could retaliate by bombing the offending driver and car out of existence, at least in the imagination, with a finger gesture thrown in for good measure. And yet, I contend that the anger was not the primary emotion. Rather, it is a programmed response that society has taught us is more appropriate than the emotion one first experiences. Question: what are the names we use to describe a person who is fearful? Now, that's not a rhetorical question. I'm waiting for your responses. What do we call people who exhibit fear? Scaredy cat, wimp. You know, I hadn't heard that one before, but yeah, I'll go with that. Anything else? Yellow, you know, chicken, wimp. There's not a positive term in that bunch, especially Republican. I'm going to remember that one. I'm going to put that in. I'm going to write that one in. There's not a positive descriptive in the bunch. I have asked this question of people for 30 years, and no one has offered a positive descriptive yet. Society has condemned us to see fear as a weakness and to see anger as the power emotion. Consider how often we attempt to prove that we are not afraid in circumstances created to induce fear. We, not me, ride roller coasters and go through haunted houses built to cause a fearful response. We tell children there is nothing to be afraid of when they fear the dark or monsters under the bed. Basically, the unknown, which is truly a fear-inducing event. I don't believe it matters that there is nothing in the dark and no monsters under the bed. Their fear is real in the moment, from whatever underlying cause, and we do them a disservice by teaching them that that emotion that they experience, fear, is a wrong emotion, that they don't know their own mind. I see fear differently. I see it as a child does, a tool that keeps us safe. When a child feels fear and calls for mommy or daddy, fear has been the tool that brings them comfort and support. And so I define fear in a positive way. I define fear as a reasonable response to a real or perceived danger. For example, in the north, when it snows, our fear causes us to drive more carefully, a reasonable response to the real danger present in the moment. I know this. I lived in Maine for 24 years, summer and winter. Now, days later, after the temperature has risen and fallen several times, we perceive the possibility of danger, black ice, and we drive more carefully. Now, fear of ice on the road in July is paranoia, and that's for a discussion between you and your mental health provider. Since moving to Tampa, I've developed a new descriptive example based on my recent experience, and I experienced it this morning. My fear when driving through standing water causes me to slow down even when the rain is long stopped. I'm sure you do the same. I saw other people doing the same too. Let's move to the past, the far, far distant past, cave days past. The threats that caused fear were clear-cut and physically present. A saber-toothed tiger or a mastodon. When a hunter was confronted, he didn't want to think, do they want to harm me? That kind of behavior, thinking, would get him killed. He needed to act, and the body was a more than willing partner. Question, yeah, this is your part again. What is the first thing you do when afraid, when a car almost cuts you off in traffic, or someone walks up behind you and you are startled? Before that, you take in a breath and hold it. That is now our first reaction, is a sudden, sharp intake of breath. With that intake of breath, our body begins to flow adrenaline. One result of adrenaline's flow is to stop the thinking process. After all, wondering is that saber tooth or that mastodon out to get me would get me dead. The other result of adrenaline is to give the body energy to physically protect me by fighting or running away. The problem is, our bodies haven't changed, even though the natures of our fears have. Our adrenaline spigot's still open, but our fears are less concrete. We can no longer run away or physically fight them. Will I be able to pay the bills this month? Will my child do well in school? Will I be the next person my employer lays off? Will I be rejected when I disagree with my church's choices on immigration or GLBTQ issues? Yes, even Unitarian Universalist churches, even there can and sometimes are differing opinions, ranging from mild to those that are strongly held. These are the things we fear today and deny. For fear is a weakness. That's what we have been taught. From our earliest years of childhood, we have been taught to suppress fear. The fear, doesn't disappear. It has to be expressed, and it is. It is expressed as anger. And thus we arrive at the reason for the epidemic of anger that we are experiencing so frequently. I could give you example after example, in the grocery store, in the bank, etc., etc. You've experienced it, seen it, been disturbed by it. I'm not going to tell you how to get rid of the anger because I can't. I can't because you can't get rid of something that doesn't exist. 99 times out of 100, when you are confronted by a person who appears angry, anger is not the issue. Fear is. The anger that surrounds us is false anger or pseudo-anger. It is the mask we have been taught to wear to hide our fear. Reflect back on the parent who reaches that child before they are harmed. The angry response is the mask they wear to hide the deep fear they experienced. And what does this teach the child? The lesson learned is, when afraid, shout and act angry. I continue to be saddened that programs that deal with bullying in schools are anti rather than pro. When I looked online, all the programs were anti-bullying programs. They focus on empowering children who might otherwise be a victim of bullying. They teach children how to recognize when bullying occurs and how to take steps to get the adult support they need. That's fine as far as it goes, but it doesn't go far enough. That reaction to bullying is only half of the solution. What they are not is pro. Pro is in helping the bully with the undercover, overwhelming feelings of fear and inadequacy that they feel that prod them to act out in a bullying manner. When we are confronted by an angry person, our instincts for self-protection causes us to erect a wall to keep ourselves safe. We automatically prepare to meet force with force. We shout back, we argue, we tell the person to stop yelling as we continue to yell. Or we go in the opposite direction and shrink back, attempt to become small and say nothing, prompting the angry person to yell even louder to get our attention. Are you listening to me? When we face a person who is afraid, our manner is very different. We are compassionate, gentle, and kind. We talk slowly and softly and offer help. Following this line of thinking, let's continue down this path towards diffusion. There are 5 simple steps to turning the situation around. Number 1, breathe. Take a deep, deep, complete breath. Remember that it is the sharp intake of breath that starts the flow of adrenaline. To reverse it, one must breathe. You know how people are instructed to count to 10? The intent is to provide time, but time isn't an answer. At this moment, thinking is the key ingredient. Breathing stops the flow of adrenaline. What's already there soaks into the tissues and one can think again. Most people don't really breathe completely. I've got a workshop on this. Maybe we'll have it one day. But practice breathing so that it will kick in automatically. Remember, you're not able to think about it right now, so it has to be automatic. Number 2, reframe. Ask yourself, could this person be afraid rather than angry? It really doesn't matter whether the other person is afraid or angry because it's not about them. It's about you and how you respond. When you ask yourself that question and respond as if the person is fearful, you lower the protective wall because it isn't necessary, and you can offer the hand of hope and help rather than the fist of self-protection. Number 3, model the behavior you want. Talk softly and slowly. Ask for the positive, never the answer. Never the negative. I can hear you better when you talk more quietly. Even in other situations, reinforce what you want, not what you don't. When you tell a child to stop yelling, the last word they hear is ask the child to whisper. When they run, ask them to skip. Remember how people often retreat when yelled at? They stop listening, they tune out, they hear little or none of what is said. My family knew when I was seriously angry, and they listened carefully because I talked very, very slowly and lowered my voice to just barely audible level. When one talks like this, people strain to hear rather than tune out. Number 4, offer options. Don't ask, how can I help you, or what do you want, if they knew they wouldn't be in the state they're already in. Remember, they're not thinking clearly. Asking them questions increases their fear because they don't know the answers. Instead, offer them 2 equal options. Would you like to write out the problem, or would you like me to write it down as you tell me about it? Number 5, promote action. Bleed off some of the energy that has been generated by the adrenaline. Get them to write, take a seat, or walk to another area. I've yet to define or talk about true anger. I've defined fear as our primary emotion, as a safety mechanism. I've defined pseudo-anger as a learned response, a mask we slip into to hide the true fear we are experiencing and have learned to deny. I do not claim that anger doesn't exist. It just doesn't manifest itself in significant abundance. It is rarely compared with our other emotions. It does exist, though, and I want to address it. I define anger as a flash fire response to immediate situation when one has been hurt or harmed. When I walk down the street and I stub my toe on a crack in the sidewalk, I am angry because I hurt. When I walk down that street 2 weeks later and I exhibit anger, no stub toe, no pain, that's pseudo-anger. I'm afraid that my taxes will be raised to effect repairs on all of the sidewalks. Not convinced? Think of a campfire. What does it take for the fire to burn other than oxygen? Fuel. And when the fuel is gone, what happens to the fire? It goes out. It burns out. And so it is with anger. Without the immediate situation, fuel, there is no anger. There is no fire. As a therapist, I helped clients wrestle with this phenomena. When they would express current anger over events years in the past, I helped them to recognize that their reaction was that of fear. Fear that they would do the same things their parents had done, or what they would not do to be good parents. Why was it important for them, and why is it important for you to know the difference? It's important because you can't get rid of something that doesn't exist. If it is not anger, if it is in fact fear, it's like getting rid of the smoke, but not the source of the smoke. And the fire, the fear, will continue to burn and continue to cloud your days with smoke. As we will all too soon be subjected to another long, continuous election season, as we continue to work for the rights of the LGBTQ community, as we push for immigration justice, there will be times when anger will appear to raise its ugly head. When we know we are right and they are wrong. When they know they are right and we are wrong. Point one, breathe. Yeah, I know I already talked about it, but it bears repeating. Breathe. Point two, you can't convince someone of something they don't want to believe. So don't try. Point three, when you believe the other person has to believe the same as you do, ask yourself, is it them you are trying to convince or yourself? And point four, the only person who has to know you are right is you. No agreement is necessary. When you follow the 5-point diffusion plan I outlined earlier and these 4 points, any contentious situation becomes simply a discussion. Debates are for high school and college competitions. They are not even for elections. Our lives don't have to be a debate with a winner and a loser. After writing all this, I realized I haven't defined civility. Civility is courtesy and politeness. Courtesy is defined as 1, excellence of manners or social conduct, or 2, agreement or consent in spite of fact. Fear not the state of disagreement. We can politely and with courtesy agree to disagree once the facts as we know them have been relayed. It really comes down to this. Is the peace of your own mind less important than the conversion of the other person's thoughts and beliefs? Retrain yourself to recognize and respond appropriately to your fears. Recognize when the fear of being wrong turns you into a competitive individual wearing the mask of anger. Allow your children to continue in their natural states, experiencing the emotion of the moment. Teach them that fear is a positive, protective device and to use it to stay safe. Teach them how to deal with true anger appropriately, that when angry, thought and slow action will be a solution they want to embrace. There are 2 other small elements that help us to be civil. Laughter brings joy, and a smile creates connection. This topic is very personal for me. As I drove back from Jacksonville yesterday, I was switching radio stations in an area with poor reception. I finally wound up on a PBS station and listened to the end of a report. The interviewee was a retired FBI special agent in the Jacksonville office. They were talking about the issue of police and black deaths. The interviewer asked, the gist of the conversation was that the former FBI agent said she would never have questioned police if she had been stopped. She hadn't been raised that way. The interviewer asked her, "Do you think the difference might be because you are a white woman and that black men and women might be treated differently?" The former FBI agent said, "No." I immediately was angry, extremely angry. I said, "Well, you just lost any credibility that you might have had." And then I took a deep breath and realized it wasn't anger I was feeling, it was fear. Fear that her belief is the one that pervades, and as long as it pervades, those deaths will continue. I say this is personal for me because, quite honestly, driving to Jacksonville and back, there are areas that I drive through in which I am very, very uncomfortable. I passed a truck with a battle flag flying from the rear, and on the side, the door, the sign said, "Southern Hospitality." Well, you know they're code words, and for me, Southern Hospitality with a Confederate battle flag next to it indicates a different kind of Southern hospitality than for someone else. I truly drive carefully every time I go through those areas of the state. Finally, you can't be pulled where you don't choose to go. It is never about them. It is always about you. You've heard about elevator speeches where you introduce yourself or your business or tell someone about Unitarian Universalism. I want to tell you about an elevator skill. When you get onto an elevator and you push the up button, which direction do you go? When you push the down button, which direction do you go? When there is a sideways button, you're in the twilight zone, and today we're dealing with reality. See, that's the laughter I was talking about, remember? Okay. Well, you are not an elevator. Unlike an elevator, you have the ability to choose the direction you will go. We can regain what has been lost. You have the ability to choose to engage in the chaos of anger or to remain in the calm of civility. Choose. Namaste and peace as you leave this place of love and support.